Hello, book lovers, and welcome to another episode of Authors Love Bookstores from a Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Joe Moldover, and I'm so happy to be here with you today for episode number 148. Every week, going back to early 2020, my partner, Kimberly Hensel-Lorance, and I have crisscrossed the country visiting all 50 states, DC, Puerto Rico, Canada, the UK, to visit authors and the independent bookstores that they love. And we have a very special program for you today, a unique program. I am with three wonderful authors to have a conversation about day jobs and writing lives. Throughout the last 3.5 years, one topic that has consistently come up on the program and that Kimberly and I have always found fascinating is the question of how authors reconcile their creativity with the demands of the rest of their lives. And we've wanted to have a conversation about it, and we are so thrilled to be with these three authors today to take it up. So I'm just going to briefly say who we are with, moving around the screen. Linda Kass is joining us. Linda's most recent novel is Bessie. She is also the owner of Gramercy Books in Bexley, Ohio, just outside of Columbus. Linda, welcome to the program. Thank you for being here. Congratulations on Bessie.
Thank you, Joe.
Melissa Rivero is joining us. Melissa is the author of The Affairs of the Falcons, and her second book is forthcoming, Flores and Miss Paula, on December 5th. Melissa is coming from a background with a legal education and work as an attorney. And then we are also joined by Dr. Saumya Dave, a psychiatrist who is the author of Well-Behaved Indian Women and more recently, What a Happy Family. Saumya, welcome to the program and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I am going to kick things off with a quote that I kind of love. This is a quote by Kafka. And Kafka said that being a writer while having a day job is, quote, a horrible double life from which there is probably no escape but insanity. So that was Kafka's take. That comes actually from kind of a delightful article on LitHub about day jobs, which we'll post in the chat for the audience, and I think people will enjoy it. But yeah, I want to put that out there and ask for people to respond. So I'm going to sort of go around in a little bit of a round robin. Saumya, you are our resident psychiatrist here, so I think I'm going to go to you first since we are talking about insanity. But I would love to ask each one of you, beginning with Saumya, if you can say something. First of all, if you would say something about your work. So I think for people who might not know your work, we would love to hear in particular about What a Happy Family and about your day job and about your take on that quote. Do you think that you are living a horrible double life that is going to drive you to insanity? Or do you feel like there's a more productive synergy between your day job and your writing life?
So I love, first of all, what a great quote to start off this conversation. It's just too perfect. So I'm the author of What a Happy Family, as you said, and that book actually follows a nuclear family set in Atlanta, Georgia, who are all hiding something about their mental health in some way from each other. And the book explores how family sometimes has to fall apart in order to eventually come back together. So there's overlap, even though it's a work of fiction, there's overlap between the themes in the book and what I do in my day job. So I practice psychiatry 4 days a week. I am an adult psychiatrist. I see people between the ages of 18 and then 65, and I do a combination of therapy and then medication management. Every single day looks different. And what I will say to challenge the quote, which I still love the quote, is that I do feel that both of my jobs complement each other. And I feel very blessed for that. I think that they both stem from a curiosity about how people are the way they are, what motivates them, what inspires them, what things have happened in their past to make them feel that the way that they do about the present. So
Well, I think we've momentarily lost Saumya. Hold on just a moment, folks. We're having a tech moment. Let's see if we can get Saumya back. All right, we've lost her momentarily. Hopefully we'll get her back in a moment. That is the world of online conversations. Melissa, let me turn it over to you, and if we can get Saumya back on the page, we will bring her back into it. Oh, We might have her back. Hold on just a second. All right, we will try to work this out behind the scenes. Melissa Rivero, will you tell us a little bit about Flores and Miss Paula, which we are expecting in December and are very excited about, and also about your professional background in the legal world, and crucially, whether you are living a horrible double life that is driving you to insanity?
So, okay, Flores and Miss Paula is coming out in December. It's about a mother and a daughter, an adult daughter, and her mother they live together in Brooklyn. They are Peruvian and Peruvian American, and they're basically trying to figure out their relationship. It's been 3 years since their beloved husband and father passed away, and they're being forced to move. So that has brought up a lot of things about their past and their relationship. So Flores and Miss Paula is my second novel. I worked full time when I wrote both of my novels. So and I had children, small children, when I was writing them as well. So I honestly don't know what it's like to have concentrated writing time. Like that doesn't, I don't, I don't have an MFA. I studied business, international business and marketing in undergrad. So I only know how to write in these sort of very hectic, I guess, and kind of intense living situations or just existence. And I think that having written my first novel while writing full time, I didn't know any different. You know what I mean? With my second novel, I kind of knew how my writing process was, but I also knew that every piece of writing is different. It will dictate its own form, like a child. Like you've got to tailor yourself in many ways to that child, right? And so I knew that I needed to leave room for discovery and for letting my characters guide me and all of that. But the structure that I needed for my writing practice really was came from my day job, right? And dropping off the kids at school and all of that. So if I was working from, let's say, 10 to 6, dropping off the kids at school at 8:30, I would write between 8:30 and 9:15, either on the train or in a coffee shop or somewhere. And that was great for me. That worked for me. Then when the pandemic hit and we were in quarantine and I was Zoom schooling and still working this very intense job, I didn't have the commute. And that really threw me off. I actually needed that. And so in many ways, the job wasn't it didn't drive me nuts. It actually provided a structure in my day that allowed me to write. Okay, I can write here and I can write here. And writing on the margins the margins of your life is challenging in its own ways, for sure. But once that was taken away in some ways, at least the commute, it became harder for me to differentiate between what was my writing time and what was work, parenting. It all kind of blended in together. There was no separation. And so I had to really commit to finding 30 minutes for my writing practice and for this particular novel. I will admit, though, that after I sold this book, I quit my job. I was burnt out. And I knew enough that I knew enough about having published my first book that I didn't want to go through the whole editing process and all of that with my second book in the state that I was in. I was just so burnt out. So I quit my job. So right now I have no day job. But I do think that, just to be frank, I mean, there are very few published writers that can actually make a living solely off of their advance or their writing. So I do still have to find a job or another way that can still accommodate my writing practice and allow me to continue to do what I do. Because I do think that it can be a little it maybe can border on insanity if you're trying to do too much.
Trying to do too much. I mean, I love so much of what you say, and I appreciate you being so honest about it. I love the phrase you use, sort of writing on the margins of your life. I think that's such a great way of capturing that feeling. And I also love what you say about how each writing project is kind of like a child and sort of needs their own, like need something. As a parent of like 4 kids, like I hear that, and I think that makes a tremendous amount of sense. Saumya, you're back. We're so happy to have you back. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I don't know what was happening because I could
Oh.
see everyone, but I was hidden. And so now I'm on my phone and hopefully we're okay. But I apologize.
Oh yeah, no, we can hear you loud and clear. We're so delighted to have you back. So before we move on to Linda, you were in the middle of talking to us when the gremlins undermined the machine. So would love to hear the rest of what you were saying. I mean, I think you were sort of saying something fairly positive about, you were sort of pushing back on Kafka, and which is probably a good thing for a psychiatrist to do. And I'm not sure he was like a paragon of mental health, but and I think sort of saying that you found that there was something more synergistic between your fiction and your day job than maybe he found. So I think you were in the middle of telling us that maybe.
No, I think you articulated it so well. So I definitely think they're synergistic now. And I also think that when I was in medical school and in my residency training, I did not feel that way. I felt as though what I was doing during the day and oftentimes in the evenings and weekends really took away from my writing. And so at that time, I think I was very frustrated and overwhelmed and wondered, how is it ever going to be possible to do these different things? But what I found is that sometimes there's a seasonal aspect of it, right? We have certain seasons of our life that might shift our focus into certain areas more than others. And that's okay. And also that, I think every single person I've ever met in my life is multifaceted. And so it's okay that we also have different parts of ourselves that we want to pursue in different ways as well. So I think just having that openness over the years has helped me learn a lot, even on a personal level.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I completely agree with you. One thing I'm going to want to come back and speak with you all about in just a few moments is also, I like what you say about the seasons of life and, the sequence in which our lives roll out. I mean, I found that I wasn't really able to focus on writing fiction until I was through my professional training, until I was through my internship, until I had, board certification, like all of this stuff. And then I could sort of be like, oh, I think it might be that I'm a writer. But that wasn't something that came to me when I was 20. And so I want to sort of talk about that sequence with people. But first, we've not yet come to Linda Kass. So Linda, you were coming to us, I believe, from outside of Columbus, Ohio. I have to say, we don't try to play favorites, but on Authors Love Bookstores, I think you probably have our favorite day job, since we are a show that is dedicated to supporting independent booksellers. And I will say, before I turn things over to you, to the audience, that Everybody's Books, What a Happy Family, Bessie, pre-order of Flores and Miss Paula are all available through Gramercy Books, and there are links in the chat. Linda, tell us about Bessie, tell us about your day job, and tell us whether you are going insane.
Well, I do love that quote too. Well, Joe, Bessie is a fictional portrait of, and I do historical fiction. So it is a historical novel. Bessie is based on a real person, Bess Meyerson. Many people under a certain age have never heard of Bess Meyerson, but she was an iconic figure. And what followed her through her life was the fact that she was Miss America in 1945. But the fact is, this is not a book about a Miss America pageant winner. It is really the moral and psychological underpinnings of this woman who became a celebrity. She's a woman who became, after my book, because I don't go there, I really deal with her from age 12 to 22 for the year after she won the crown. But Bess Meyerson was a Jewish woman, and she won the Miss America pageant actually 6 days after the official end of World War II. In 1945. It was a remarkable time, frankly, for a Jewish woman to be selected and represent American women, frankly. This was not a woman who was brought up in any way or shape to be a beauty pageant contestant. She was poor. She grew up in the Bronx. She had Russian immigrant parents. She was a piano prodigy. She was very talented. She was very smart. She went to the High School of Music and Art that became very famous in New York City. You had to be selected from all 5 of the boroughs if you were very talented in music or in art, graphic art. And so this was a woman who really, it's a book about identity and belonging more than it is about a beauty pageant, although that does come to play, and about a woman who was an outlier very much and had to struggle through from her very sort of enclave where she lived in the Bronx to the more secular world where she ended up finding her voice and finding her place. And I end the book at her, 22, right after she won the crown, and she got very involved in social justice issues. And that was really what she ended up doing for the rest of her life in many ways. But, in terms of my day job, being a bookseller, sometimes people have this vision of, oh, you're sitting there reading books all the time. And, it takes a huge army of people to deal with all that goes on in a bookstore. As all the authors here on this panel know, books come out every Tuesday. So there is a huge shipment that hits our store every single Tuesday. And all those books have to be inserted into our system. And we are constantly, not just a store where people come in, but we are involved in all kinds of offsite events and offsite opportunities where we bring books. They may not be our author events. We do have a very active author program, and I actually curate our author program. Besides sort of overseeing the store itself, I really kind of curate the author program and much of the marketing. So in terms of what does it do? So being a bookseller means that I now read so much more than I ever read before. I go through a book every 5 days. And that has helped my writing, because as we all know, the more we read, the better we can write. But on the other hand, it has also occupied a lot of space in my head where I need to kind of think through new ideas and develop ideas for my books. Bessie is my 3rd historical novel. I have another novel in me that I'm thinking about, but I am just too busy to really delve into it. When I finally have all my thoughts together and I start inputting things on a page, or in a document or several documents, and I really kind of know a little bit about what this roadmap might look like, then I'm pretty disciplined about carving out a few hours, multiple days a week, maybe 4 days a week, when I'm really ready to write. When I'm at the stage I'm in now, which is sort of thinking a lot, doing some research, it's much more sporadic. I know that everyone has different processes and different styles. I think it's what works for you. That's my biggest advice to anyone, because not everyone can just sit down and write every day, 6 days a week, 7 days a week. It won't work in my life. That's for sure. So I just do try to balance. I try to compartmentalize really, in terms of what I do at work, and in my private life. And then when I have that time to sit down and concentrate on that idea and that story. I'm a multitasker, so I'm able to, and, I think that, so for me, it sort of complements writing. On the other hand, it slows me down, but I'm okay about that. And unlike all of you, I'm a late bloomer. I'm a journalist by training. I have a master's degree in journalism, and I was an investigative writer, magazine writer for several years. And so I was a nonfiction writer. And I really pivoted to creative writing about 15 years ago. And it was when my daughter was getting ready to go, she was done with high school, going to college. So I didn't have children and all these other, obligations, but I did have family obligations nonetheless. So I maybe had a little less to balance, but the bookstore has been around for 7 years. So I probably researched everything there was to know about bookstores and what made them successful for about 3 years before that. So my novel writing has paralleled, frankly, the genesis of my bookstore. So I've always had two things going on like that really pulled me in different directions. And I wouldn't say it's made me insane. I think it just makes me appreciate, I don't know. I feel very lucky. So I don't feel insane about this.
That's great. So it sounds like none of you are actually going insane from your double life, which is fantastic. And thank you for that answer, Linda. That is great. And very much on point for this show, we're going to have to let Saumya go in a few moments to go see a patient. So, which is, I think, sort of like part of what we're talking about here in terms of doing this juggle and living this double life. Saumya, before we let you go, though, I want to make sure I get in a question or two that I really want to ask you. One of them is, and this is something I think about for myself a lot. If you could leave your day job, you've put so much time and years into becoming a psychiatrist. So I think for people who don't know, a psychiatrist has to go to medical school, has to do general medicine, and then has to do psychiatric residency, has to do board certification. It's a very, very, very long path. You've done it. If you won the lottery, or if you got a massive advance on your next book, which I think is kind of like winning the lottery, would you want to just write full time and leave the world of psychiatry behind? Does that appeal to you, or not?
First of all, I love the question. And I used to think that was my goal. When I was in medical school, I thought, okay, if I can do something with writing that feels like it's more financially stable, that's the path I'm going to go. And then ironically, I really wasn't expecting this. When I was in my residency training, I just enjoyed seeing people so much and learning about just not only just the history of psychiatry and psychology, but even the different types of therapeutic interventions that exist, the way the field is always changing. I find it so intellectually stimulating and fulfilling that I actually now can say that I really do want to do both. If I won the lottery, I'd probably just have other luxuries that I could get, but I actually don't know that anything about my work would change whatsoever. I think I would still want to do both of these jobs. And what I also realized about myself, and I think the pandemic really put this into perspective for me, is that as much as I enjoy being by myself, reading and writing, I also really enjoy being around other people and learning them as well, learning from their stories. And that includes when I'm seeing patients and also even connecting with other writers. I really enjoy that because I think that's where I learn the most. So I have changed in that, speaking back to the openness that I was talking about before. I thought I was one way, and then it turns out that actually I wouldn't change anything. So I feel like none of us are going insane from our double lives, like you said, which is pretty incredible when we sit back.
It is pretty incredible. It is definitely a plus. I think people, I've had moments where I thought I was maybe going to go insane, but it's I think we're all hanging in there.
That's right.
That's fantastic. Well, I know that we need to let you go, and we need to let you go and do your day job. But thank you so much for joining us. To the audience, we are going to hold on to Linda and Melissa for a few more minutes, but Saumya Dave, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure. It's your second time in Authors Love Bookstores, so we're delighted. To the audience, pick up copies of What a Happy Family and Well-Behaved Indian Women. We have links. Do it to support independent book selling. The links that we have shared, you can do it with your local indie bookstore, but we also have links to get the book sent to you through Gramercy Books in Bexley, Ohio, and a little bit of a crossover to Linda's store. And Saumya, thank you so much for being here. It's delightful to see you, and good luck.
Thank you so much. This was so lovely. I'm so sorry I have to go early, and I really appreciate this conversation and just there being more around this. So thank you so much for doing everything you do for us. Really.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
You
Bye.
too. Melissa, I would love to come back to you. So we were just talking about Saumya, and a couple of questions that it brings up for you. I think first of all, Linda refers to herself as a late bloomer who went through a career as a journalist and also raising her child, and before it sort of, I guess, dawned on her, that she was meant to be a novelist. You like Saumya have had a long on-ramp. So I mean, you have a background as an attorney. Obviously went to law school, had to get past the bar, all of these things. I mean, for all of that time, were you sort of like actually yearning to be a fiction writer and to be a novelist, or did you realize that you were meant to be a novelist sort of after all of that stuff, after that, what Saumya calls that season of your life, after that was over?
No, I've always been a writer.
Yeah.
So I think I probably wrote my first poem when I was like 5 or 6. Like I learned how to read and write in Spanish before I learned English. So I remember that because I made my dad cry when he found it and read my poem. And then I was writing short stories when I was in 6th grade, 7th grade that were winning prizes.
Mm.
So but I never thought that I would grow up to be a novelist. It was just, I'm just always writing, and then once I went to college, I did like what I thought was practical. Like I went to an undergraduate business school. I worked in advertising for a few years, sort of, trying to work on my marketing and international business degrees that I had. And then I went to law school. But again, not really sort of thinking that I needed to be a novelist or anything. I think the pivotal moment for me pivotal time was after my dad passed away. Once he passed away, and this was right after the 2008 Lehman Brothers collapse and recession and whatnot, I needed some joy in my life. Like I really needed time to think about what it is that I wanted to do with my life, because where I was not where I wanted to really be. And I was working at this, big law firm in New York City at the time, and there was no one there that I wanted to be like. You know what I mean? Like there was no one there who I felt like that's who I want to be. Like that's those, I want to find out how she did it, and I want to be there. There weren't that many she's to begin with. And and the way they were telling me how they did it, I was like, I don't want to do that. So after my dad passed away and I went back to work, I was like, I can't do this. I took time off, or I took a job. Like they were offering, they were telling people to go work at nonprofits. They would give you part of your salary. I needed that. So I did that. And then I had more time. I wasn't working till 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. And I just reverted to doing the things that I enjoyed. And that was writing and dance. And I took a writing class here in New York. And one of my instructor suggested that I look into this writing workshop for writers of color that VONA, that happens at the time, was happening once a year. I applied, I got in, and that's where I met people who really took their writing practice seriously. And I realized, I've always been a writer. I just didn't think that was something that people did just, for fun. I don't know. I always thought of like writers as like, this is like a career kind of thing, but people were also doing it to excavate and to find things about themselves. And if they have something to say, they were doing it by writing. And then the writing just kind of like the novels came from that practice of just writing and imagining. And I can't say that when I started like Affairs of the Falcons, I didn't set out to write a novel. I was just writing something that happened to a character that I found very compelling, and I just kept following her, and that became a novel.
Mm. Mm. And I have more questions for you about what it's been like to sort of leave the day job and to be a full-time novelist. But first, I want to sort of just go over to Linda for a moment, because Linda, part of what we're sort of talking about when we're talking about this life is the ability to juggle, the ability to multitask. And I think from your answer to my prior question, it sounds like you are a master multitasker. And so I want to ask you just about that a little bit more sort of concretely. I know people who are independent booksellers, and I know that there's just a tremendous amount of like stimuli coming in. I mean, you're being barraged by emails, people who publicists, people who want to do events, marketing from all of the big publishing houses, to say nothing of people who are self-publishing, and then also there's just the day-to-day business of running the store. You've got to like keep the lights on and pay the bills and sell some books. So in a very concrete sense, how do you do it? And I guess what I mean by that is, do you have to go someplace else on the other side of town? Do you have to shut off Wi-Fi? Do you have to lock yourself in a room, like, and not disclose your location to your employees? Like, just take us through, just in a very, very concrete, physical way, how is it possible to spend time on research, not just writing a novel that requires a tremendous amount of research, and actually produce? Just what's the secret?
Okay. Well, first of all, I have a team, because one person does not run a bookstore. It is a team of wonderful people, and I am very lucky and grateful for the staff, the booksellers that comprise Gramercy Books. So we have two co-managers. One deals with operations, one deals with digital marketing, digital media. And as I had mentioned, I have a business partner, and he looks through the financials very closely. We look at that together. I curate all the programming, and that is where a lot of, like you just described, input, emails, requests. Also, we request, there's a whole process in terms of bringing authors into bookstores. And we want to have a mix of local authors and regional and national authors. And my store, all the shelves were built on rollers. I learned that during my research, because I wanted to utilize every inch of it for books, but I wanted to have an event space. So we moved those bookshelves around, and we're able to create about 65 seats, theater style. That's my max. And so when I know I'm going to go beyond that with an author, a national author, let's say, I have these places that I work with around me, nearby me, to go offsite and feature authors. And I typically have to, I always like to bring conversants, interlocutors, so to speak, to to make it an interesting program for audiences, and an individual who's appropriate for that person's book and theme, to have that kind of conversation. So I'm very focused on that, and it does take a huge amount of my energy. I don't work inside. I have to tell you, I live right above my bookstore. Okay. So it's a very convenient thing for me, because I have my office where I am sitting right now, and I do a lot of work, and I'm up and down a lot. But see, I've got, staff that are at that counter. So I am not, I will be in the bookstore and I will talk to customers, but that is not what I do all the time. My value to this bookstore is in developing these author programs, because we do probably 4 a month. They're a lot. It's a lot. And, I know who our customers are, and I try to mix it up so that we have all kinds of things, different programs. We have book club formatted programs. And we just recently, this past year, we had one kind of book club format, which is sort of literary fiction for the most part, or commercial literary fiction. We started a romance book club because we noticed there were so many people who were reading these romance novels. And literally those romance book clubs are sold out like before we can even announce them practically. And so, we're constantly doing and trying to do new things. COVID sort of stalled us for a few years where we were, just making sure we were surviving and getting through that and getting customers to know what we were doing at that time when maybe we were closed and they weren't coming in. So we had to bring the bookstore to them. It allowed us to refine how we market ourselves to them. That's a whole nother big aspect of what we do. How do we bring our store into people's homes in a way they don't feel bombarded? So, there's just so many things that are part of, running that store. I mean, our managers are scheduling the staff, and, I have to be very cognizant as I'm programming events that, we only have so many staff. It's a small bookstore. I'm about 2,500 square feet. And we are open 7 days a week, and staff work so many hours, and you have so many staff. And if you're doing evening events and offsite events, and, it takes staff time, and you just have to spread it out.
Yeah, I mean, you're living the dream. For a lot of us who are writers, I mean, you're living the dream, right? I mean, you're sort of like living above the bookstore and, writing. And then, I mean, it's like, it's living the dream. But I mean, clearly it just requires so much work and is just sort of so much multitasking. Speaking of living the dream, Melissa, I have a question for you. And so our resident therapist had to leave early, so I'm going to take on that role. So you have lived the dream in many ways because you were an attorney, you had a day job, and then you wrote this, you took a writing class. It turned out you're a great writer. You wrote a book. The book got published. The book won. I know I'm talking about The Affairs of the Falcons. Won the New American Voices Award, I believe, which is amazing. And you were able to leave your day job, and now you have your second novel coming out. My question for you is whether you have regrets about leaving the day job and about doing it full time. And I'll just sort of frame that by saying, when I fantasize about that, which is something I do a lot, there are two things I think, and on the downside. And one of them is I think, God, I would be so isolated. I would just like never see anyone. I would never talk to anyone. I would just, I would be like totally, which sounds great in many ways, but I sort of feel like after a week, I might go a little bit bonkers. So I would worry about the isolation. And then the other thing, just from a very practical point of view, is I would really wrestle with the financial reality of being a full-time writer. I mean, every time I'm waiting on a royalty check, or every time I am, trying to finish edit so I can get part of an advance, or, whatever it is, I'm like, oh my God, thank God this is not how I'm paying my mortgage. Like, thank God I have a day job. So what about it? Do you have regrets? Is there isolation? Is there anxiety?
So I didn't quit my job until I sold my second book.
Got it.
And I don't regret it, only because that was an intense time with quarantine and all of that, and with my kids being home and Zoom schooling. So I don't regret quitting. I think that under different circumstances, if the job was not as stressful, I mean, we were 4 lawyers, okay, 4 lawyers. And then within the span of 2 weeks, in the middle of quarantine, the other 3 lawyers quit, and it was just me. And we're talking about a company that had, at that point, I think 220 employees.
Wow.
So I was stressed. So I think that if circumstances had been different, I probably wouldn't have quit my job. I might have asked to maybe scale back my role a little bit while my book was, going through the editing process, and then maybe go back to full time once I've sort of it's been published and stuff. So I don't regret quitting that job. And you're absolutely right. There is anxiety with the way publishing pays or doesn't pay. But with the way that how you get paid and the amounts and all of that. So I think that for my own mental health, I really needed to step away from that job and just get myself back to myself. So I think that for me personally, I probably would. I know that I do better with a day job.
Mhm.
So and I think I knew that even before writing. Like when I had my second kid, I knew that I did not want to be home for a year. Like 4 months, I'm going back to work, and then maybe I'll do part time, to start. But like I knew that I didn't want to. That the isolation is hard.
Yeah.
So I think at some point I will go back to having like a day job. Um, uh, Maybe not a day job, but a job that exists outside of writing, because I do miss the interactions with other people. I think part of the reason why I delved so deeply into Flores and Miss Paula during the pandemic was because I missed my coworkers. I missed being around people. I miss the office drama. So I do think I need a little bit of that in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be law. Law is extremely intense. I don't want to like make, stereotypes, stereotype lawyers, but they love to argue, as they should, because that's what they're trained to do. But I don't want to argue all the time. I would
Yeah.
love like a chill job that allows me to like maintain the energy that I need to go create at home.
Oh, that's an interesting question. What do you think is the perfect day job? I mean, do you think it's got to be something that sort of like is structured, that's kind of like intellectually stimulating, but that doesn't sort of like consume your life the way that I think my sense is that being a lawyer kind of can.
Yes.
I mean, what do you think is the perfect thing?
I don't know. I don't know what that is. I mean, if anyone out there knows, let me
What is
know.
it? Yeah.
Let me know. Like,
Oh my gosh.
I don't know. I don't know what that is. I like the aspects of legal work that I liked were advising people and, helping them solve problems. At the same time, having to put out fires all the time
Yeah.
is exhausting.
Absolutely. Linda, last question for you before we go into book recs, but sort of a similar question here that I gave to Saumya. So let's say that, God willing, Bessie gets turned into a major motion picture, it wins a bunch of Oscars, and you get like a huge multi-book deal and a big payout and all of that stuff. Would you be happy selling the store, walking away from the store, walking away from it all, and just you're shaking your head, which is kind of what I was guessing, but you wouldn't want to just go and write full time?
No, I really think that there's a stimulation that
Yeah.
comes from doing things, from meeting people, from interacting. I mean, I feel like I'm a learner in my DNA, and so I want to learn stuff, and I love learning in my research for my books, and that's been learning certainly, but I just I want to connect with people, and um, I I wouldn't want to just be writing 7 days a week in my office. It's a very isolating experience. I mean, you give up a lot when you're writing, I mean, and that's why when I latch onto an idea, it has to be an idea that I have been just obsessing over almost
Mhm.
because I'm not going to spend that kind of time away from other things, unless it's something I really really can commit to,
Yeah.
and that that's kind of what happened with my last book. I was very curious about Bess Meyerson. I had read something about her, and I knew about her, because I'm of an age I did know about Bess Meyerson, and I was sort of shocked when I read that she would become Miss American at the date that she was, and so it made me curious enough to read some biographies about her. And then I was really, the more I read about her and particularly her early life, the more interesting I found it. And so that's what I wanted to focus on. And I was willing to commit myself to a couple of years to be able to produce that book and spend that kind of time. I wouldn't want to just write. No,
That's
Joe.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I mean, the way I sort of feel about it, sometimes this is maybe like a writerly thing to say, but the way I sometimes feel about it is like the job is sort of like, it can be very irritating. It can be very stressful. It can be, it can be a lot, but it's sort of like the irritation, like in like an oyster that makes a pearl. Like I know that's a very like writerly thing to say, but like I sort of feel like having those time demands, having that pressure, having that stimulation, ultimately sort of like almost filters through into the work in a really productive way, even though it can be painful at the time. Um, Wonderful to talk to both of you about that. We are about out of time. We usually go out with book recs for the audience, people watching now and people watching in future time. And we are short on time. So Linda, you are the professional here. I'm going to ask you, can you give us, I know this is really hard, give us just one book that you're really excited about right now, and just pitch it real quick to us. And we're going to be linking for audience members to pick it up from the store.
Ooh, oh my gosh, there's so many books. It's unbelievable. Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to go for my fellow book seller, Ann Patchett. Her last book, Tom Lake, is really wonderful. It's wonderful in a quiet way. Here is a book that at the center is the most wonderful play, Our Town.
Right.
And this is her 9th book, I think. And it's about family, it's about love, it's about memory, and fate. And she weaves all of these things. She's so talented and such a wonderful writer. It's about sort of this mother who's sheltering in place on the family's orchard in Michigan, with her husband Joe and their 3 20-something daughters. And she, to pass the time, sort of remembers this experience of hers as a young woman who was an actress and in Our Town, and she played opposite someone who became a very famous actor. And so that's kind of where the story is, and it goes back and forth, and there's just this, I don't know, it's just it's a book that just gets you right here.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's great. And we're linking to it in the chat. Thank you for that. Melissa, a book that you're really excited about that you want the audience to know about?
I really loved Etaf Room's Evil Eye, which came out, I think, last month. But it's a book about a Palestinian American woman who has an interaction with her coworker that leads her basically to examine her background, her history, particularly her history with her mother. And her marriage. It really leads her to do a deep examination of her marriage and what she wants from her own life, independent of her marriage and her role as a mother and as a. And I don't want to spoil it. The protagonist is very drawn to art, and so it's like, well, what is, is someone who teaches it also an artist? It's like kind of like people who want to publish novels and they're teaching writing. It's kind of like, I don't know, I kind of saw some similarities and parallels in that, but I really loved the book, and Etaf is one of my favorite writers. I also love The Woman Is No Man, so I recommend that one.
Fantastic. Yeah, I didn't know about that one. That's fantastic. Thank you. We're linking that in the chat. It's a complete pleasure to speak to both of you. To the audience, Linda Kass is her most recent novel is Bessie. Owner also of Gramercy Books in Bexley, Ohio, which we are supporting with this episode and linking for you to buy lots of stuff online to support independent book selling. Melissa Rivero, author of The Affairs of the Falcons, and forthcoming on December 5th, Flores and Miss Paula. Congratulations on the forthcoming book. And not with us now, but with us for the first part of the conversation, Saumya Dave, author of Well-Behaved Indian Women and What a Happy Family. Thank you for being here with us for this conversation. We've been wanting to have this conversation for a long time. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing insights into your writing lives, and good luck with your writing lives going forward. It's a pleasure. To the audience, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please come back next week if you're able for episode 149 of Authors Love Bookstores. On a mighty blaze. Until then, be well and keep reading.